After all of these years, finally, we have a new Mario Kart game in the form of Mario Kart World. Over the past few days, I've been playing a ton of the game, and so far, I think it's incredible. This game sucks, actually. No, but for real, this is definitely a very solid entry into the series. I don't think I can say it passes Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as my favorite yet, but I do think this game has potential to reach that point in the future with updates. But enough about what's not in the game. Okay, wait, one last thing. Larry from Mario Kart, let's get it trending. I want to talk about what the game does have in the form of the Grand Prix mode. This is the main mode in every single Mario Kart game where you have to go through a cup made up of 4 different courses to see who can get the most points. Unless you're playing Super Mario Kart, then you have to suffer through 5 courses. Bless your soul. Back when Mario Kart 8 Deluxe wrapped up its DLC, I made a ranking for all 24 of that game's cups, and you all seem to really enjoy that video. So today, I thought it'd be fun to do the same, but for the 8 cups that are currently in Mario Kart World. Just like that video, they'll be judged based on how fun they are overall and how creative they are. Now, this ranking is actually going to be a bit more interesting than the Mario Kart 8 version because of how Grand Prix was changed in Mario Kart World. Now, instead of just going through each of the 4 courses isolated on their own, as part of the cup, you'll have to drive between the tracks. That means this ranking won't just be a sort of average on my opinions on each track in the cup, as the intermission portions play a large part in the criteria alongside the tracks themselves. If you're wondering, I do definitely plan on making a track ranking later. I just wanted to get started with Grand Prix so I can have a quicker video to make for you all. I said that before figuring out how long this was. Because of that, I won't be going super in depth into each individual track, as I'll try to save those thoughts for the bigger video later down the line. Keep in mind that these are also my super early first impressions. There's clearly a lot of tech in Mario Kart World, and I haven't gotten anywhere near mastering anything yet. So these rankings could very well change in the future. But with that said, if you enjoyed this video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and let's jump right in. Now, I actually had a bit of a difficult time choosing what should be in last place here. That's because all the cups suck and I hate them. I'm just kidding, I actually did enjoy most of the cups, but I think my least favorite would have to be 8, the Shell Cup. This one falls into a few traps that I just think puts it below the others. Before we get to that though, I do want to quickly talk about the new format of these cups because I'm still not really sure if I love them yet. Due to having to drive between the tracks as part of the race, you only ever spend 1 lap on the actual track before moving on to the next. The only exception is the first track of the cup, which has you do the full 3 laps. In my opinion, that makes the cups overly reliant on their first track since it's the only one we actually get to spend any time with. I also feel like this has the side effect of making the tracks themselves, especially the new ones, feel far less memorable as they blend in with the intermission portions. Like before scripting this video, I genuinely could not tell you a thing about Faraway Oasis. I kind of miss getting to spend time on every track and getting to know what makes each of them special, which would especially help in World with its complex trick system. But okay, with all that out of the way, what do I think makes the Shell Cup the worst? Well, starting off, we have SNES Koopa Beach, and with it being an SNES track, I think you can guess that it's extremely simple. It's easily the most simple track in the game, just being a circle with a few bits of water. Now, with that said, I am a baby park enjoyer, so I think circles are cool. But having this be the only track we get to spend time with in this cup when the others are, in theory, more interesting is a bit disappointing. But I did honestly still have fun here. I like that they kept the lap count at 5 instead of the standard 3, and the new remix here is honestly pretty good. Moving on to our first intermission, and this is where the cup falls apart even further. They do try and play on my heartstrings by playing a remix of Baby Park in this portion,
but it's gonna take more than that to impress me.
The lead up here starts with a ton of water, which may sound kind of interesting, but so many tracks and intermissions use water that this really doesn't feel that special, especially since this is just a straight shot to the road. The road itself is also pretty basic until we reach the dirt, which does make things a bit more interesting. I like the armadillos that you have to dodge here as they work both as great obstacles and as unique build-up for our second track, Faraway Oasis. Although missed opportunity to make them Armads. On top of them, we also get some zebra and elephants on the lead up as well. Missed opportunity to make them Elephant Luigi. Due to the unique obstacles, I would say this is a decent lead up, but how about Faraway Oasis itself? It's surprisingly boring actually. There are no unique animals here like in the lead up that actually act as obstacles. Instead, you'll spend most of the time driving on top of water and a few wooden bits suspended in the air. This doesn't feel like a highlight at all. It honestly also feels like an intermission track. I do like the part with the waterfall turn, but yeah, this is a pretty weak track. That is especially painful when the last 2 tracks of the cup have a serious issue. They are Crown City and Peach Stadium. These 2 tracks actually both repeat in other cups, being the Mushroom Cup and Special Cup respectively. Now yes, the route you go down does change between the cups, but I still think it's a bit lame. Getting unique aesthetics is another big part of new Mario Kart tracks, so even if the routes are different, sharing an aesthetic is also not great. Not to mention that it gives less to explore in the open world, at least in the case of Peach Stadium. But what about the intermissions and tracks themselves? The lead up to Crown City is pretty solid. You first have to drive past some giraffes and ostriches, which are some more unique obstacles before going onto a bridge segment. Despite being a mostly straight path, I actually do like this section a decent amount as it's pretty cramped with all the cars and there are a ton of options with rail grinding. You can even go on top of the bridge if you really want to risk it. It does maybe go on for a bit too long, but compared to some of the other more basic roads, I like the idea here. Honestly, I might even like it more than Crown City itself. After the booster course pass and intermissions in this game, I'm really burnt out on the city theme in Mario Kart. This track really doesn't do anything special with the idea, so this just blends in with most of the others in the series. I do like the area with the graffiti as it's not something seen at all in Crown City 1, but otherwise, I didn't find this too interesting. Moving to our final track involves driving through a lot of Crown City 1 from the Mushroom Cup and then some very open road. This is some of the worst an intermission track can be. Yes, there are some obstacles, but due to how open it is, they're extremely easy to avoid. Not to mention that road is used all over the game and isn't that interesting. At least some cherry blossom trees get thrown in once we get closer to Peach Stadium, which do help with the aesthetic. As for the track itself though, it's the worst one. How? I want to apologize to Koopa Beach for calling it the most simple track in the game, because wow, look at this minimap. I know I said I like circles, but this might be my breaking point. This entire thing is entirely flat except for a staircase at the very end. The rest of the map is just boring, extremely open road. There is nothing interesting at all here and completely feels like filler. In a game with so much open road with cars, that just makes this even worse. So somehow, by the end of this cup, SNES Koopa Beach might be my favorite track here. The saving grace of this cup is that Faraway Oasis is okay, and the intermissions connected to it on both sides were pretty good. Other than that, the rest of the cup is extremely bland, so I think the Shell Cup could easily take last place for the worst cup in Mario Kart World. 7. The Flower Cup. This one hurt me to rank so low, but I genuinely couldn't bring myself to put it any higher. Starting off, we have DS Desert Hills. Now going into Mario Kart World, I think everyone, myself included, were taken aback by this choice. This is pretty agreed upon to be the worst desert track in the series, and it was already remade in Mario Kart Wii. I was expecting Dry Dry Ruins to return, but who knows, maybe they could make Desert Hills into an actually good track. It's worse. It's so much worse. First off, aesthetically. Not that the original was good, but I really miss a lot of the details like the pyramid near the start, which is now just empty desert. That's also not helped by the fact that the hills of Desert Hills have basically been killed. They do technically still exist, but they are nowhere near as extreme as they used to be. On top of that, Desert Hills also lost the fire stakes, which I think were great obstacles. They've now been replaced by them from Super Mario Land. Now I will admit that's pretty cute, and I mentioned really liking this enemy type in my 2D level ranking. Sadly those obstacles, they don't work nearly as well. I think they should have been saved for the intermissions, honestly. Oh yeah, and what makes Desert Hills being super boring even worse is the fact that it's the first track in the cup, meaning it's the only one we get to spend a full 3 laps with. So yeah, this is an atrocious start, which only gets worse as we move to the intermissions. Now I do think the Desert Cave is a pretty nice set piece, especially since we do actually get to see the fire snakes here. However, once we leave the cave, we get this massive glider segment. Now aesthetically, it does look kinda cool, but gameplay wise, you just hold forward for the entire time. If you stay in the air, there's literally nothing to do, and even if you go onto the ground, there's only a couple ramps. And then once the second section starts, you're just on the most generic desert road up until the actual track. Now at the very least, our second track, 7's Shy Guy Bazaar, is a good one. I always liked it in 7, but I love how it's recontextualized here as being part of Sarasa Land, where we can even see Daisy's castle in the background. The market area is also massively improved from the new rail grinding and wall riding mechanics, so I think this is a great choice to return for this game. Sadly though, we only get to do 1 lap here, which doesn't give you any time to appreciate just how good this track is. That's made even worse by the intermissions after just being more generic desert slop. It's nice to see some pokies, I guess, but if I really wanted to see them, I just drive as one. I mean, who doesn't want to play as a cactus? The very simple desert continues pretty much all the way up until our third track, N64 Wario Freaking Stadium. It does have a little bit of an entrance before you go inside the track, and I do really like this area, especially with the Shy Guy announcer that you can hear. As for the track itself, it easily earns the most improved award of the retros in this game. The original version of this track is one of the worst in the series as it's way too long and empty. In World though, they cut a lot of the track out, and since we can actually trick in this game, it's fun to go over the ramps here. Now I know a lot of people didn't like that it's changed so much. Those people are psychos if they like the original more, don't go near them. But that brings us to our final intermission, which is easily the best of the bunch because it's not just desert. It's also playing a remix of Waluigi Pinball, which certainly helps. You first have to go past a ton of rolling chain chomps, and while the area may be a bit too wide, I still like the unique idea here. I do wish there were a bit more obstacles though. Section 2 is where things really start to get good as we get put in this cool, dark and gloomy atmosphere that's clearly been war-torn. That's especially supported by just how broken up the road is, which helps make the gameplay much more fun as you get to trick around. That's especially the case as you get closer to the track, with the terrain becoming a super harsh slope as well, which is really different from all the other intermissions in the game. But of course, the highlight of the cup is flying off this ramp and seeing our final track, DS Airship Fortress.
How do they make this more and more epic?
In case you all weren't aware, this is one of my favorite tracks in the series, and I am more than happy to see it finally return after being snubbed from 8 Deluxe. The layout hasn't changed a ton beside adding a few rail grinding areas, but they really didn't need to change much. Dodging all the bonsai bills is still as fun as ever, weaving between the rocky wrenches is great, and even the tower feels super fun to go down. This is undeniably one of the coolest looking tracks in the series as well. They really went hard in making it feel like we are in the middle of an airship battle, which makes it all the more sad that we are only here for one lap. Normally, Airship Fortress would be able to hard carry this cup for me. I mean, it's easily a top 3 track in this game minimum, but due to the intermissions, it makes up so little of the content of the cup, I just can't justify that. In fact, the last 3 tracks here are all really solid, but since we only spend 3 laps on desert hills, this whole cup suffers for it. Not to mention, most of the intermissions here are awful, with the lead up to Airship Fortress being the only exception. As much as I would really love for this cup to be higher up, I think sadly the bad outweighs the good here. It's enough to pass the Shell Cup, but I think 7th unfortunately makes the most sense for the Flower Cup. 6th, the Mushroom Cup. Being the first cup in the game, it's understandable that it would be lower on the list. Compared to the last 2, I really don't have many issues with this cup, it's just really the fact that I had to stay simple. Kicking us off, we have Mario Bros. Circuit, and as for starting courses in Mario Kart games go, this is definitely one of the best. It's honestly battling Mario Kart Stadium for number 1 right now, though I'm definitely giving it a bit of time before I make my official judgment. I do like the idea of having it be more deserty though, which makes it stand out from all the other Mario Kart games having more bright and grassy openings. It really goes to show how different Mario Kart World will be. Gameplay on the track is relatively simple, as to be expected on a first track, but it does a good job introducing both the rail grinding mechanic and the wall jumping a bit as well. And of course, this is helped by being the first in the cup and getting the 3-lap treatment, so this is absolutely a strong start. Moving to the intermission though, it's really good. How could I not think that? They're playing Jump Up Superstar. Okay, in all seriousness, yeah, this is pretty weak. Really happy we got a Jump Up Superstar remix because Odyssey my beloved, but the track itself is the worst victim of the plain open road. Granted, this is the first intermission, so I'll give it a little bit of leeway, but I still found it to be too open and straightforward. It stays pretty much exactly like that all the way up until we reach our second track, Crown City. Now I already mentioned that this gets repeated, and I'm not a huge fan of city tracks. However, I do like this more here than its Shell Cup appearance. I really enjoy that it takes us up through the skyscrapers to the top of the city, which is something not done in most Mario Kart City tracks. There's a lot of options on how to move about this section, including some more rails to get players more used to the concept. I also love how once you reach the top, you have to jump back down to the bottom, which I think was a lot of fun. So while I still don't love the fact that it repeats, this is certainly the better of the 2 versions. The next intermission takes us through more of Crown City, which isn't all too interesting, but I like that it's more cramped than the first intermission. The second segment though, I think is kinda cool, putting us on a big railway where we can practice some more rail grinding. The area is really open, but at least the setting is unique. We do also get to go on a bridge, which I think helps with some more risky rails to grind on. All of that builds up really well to our third track, Whistle Stop Summit. This is pretty much rail grinding the track, and since I like the mechanic, I quite enjoy this. There are several areas where you get to go across alternate routes with rails, and I especially like the bridge where you can jump between the edges. Having a train obstacle is also nice and fits the setting perfectly. But moving on to our final track, we first drive through a fairly cramped cliffside, which isn't the most special intermission, but I think works well. I also like the bit where we get to see a bunch of Goomba shoes jumping around. Why are they yellow now? After that, we do have a bit more generic road before we get to the final track, DK Spaceport. I love the aesthetic here a lot. It's very different from anything else in the franchise, especially any DK track, as this is very robotic. This is also one of the few tracks we get to experience in full. Since it's normally split up into sections, we don't have to worry about not doing 3 laps here. The whole thing acts as a reference to the original Donkey Kong arcade game, and flying in, you can even see how the track is set up to look like 25M. You can even hear its theme play as part of the track, which is burned into my brain because people think it's so funny to play during Smash Bros. I'm sure some people may not like the zigzaggy nature of the track here, but I honestly really enjoyed it, and each section is very distinct from one another. Sometimes you'll be dodging barrels, wall jumping across several walls, or even some more rail grinding. I love how this tops off with the final showdown with the DK mech, as it acts as a perfect conclusion to not only the track, but the cup as a whole. Overall, for being the first cup in the game, this was a very strong showing. Really, it's only being held back by its intermissions. The tracks themselves are definitely the most solid selection across the board so far. 5. The Banana Cup. Now we're really starting to get into the difficult to rank territory territory, as I feel like the cups were all very similar to each other quality-wise. This kicks us off with GCN Peach Beach, and I think this is the most changed track of the retros. If you didn't tell me this was Peach Beach, I honestly might not have noticed. The first lap is the only real recognizable part, as it follows pretty closely to the Double Dash original, even down to the Cataquacks. Lap 2 though really mixes it up, as it has us taking a left instead of a right into a town area. This is all entirely new content, and I think it's one of the best areas to showcase this game's new parkour mechanics. There are so many walls to ride and rails to grind, so I really look forward to seeing what the community cooks up for this track in terms of optimal routing. Now I will say, once you reach the water, the track does fall off a little bit since it's pretty open and plain without much to do, but overall I did still quite enjoy this remake. Unfortunately, the next intermission is extremely weak, taking place on a very standard beach. There are a few Cataquacks, but really nothing else of note. That continues all the way up until our next track, Salty Salty Speedway. It gives off very similar vibes to Peach Beach, which may sting for some in terms of aesthetic variety, but I do still enjoy what we got. The idea here is that we have to race through another town, but the bottom is a big river. This is really cool as it gives you the option of racing on the water or trying your parkour skills on the buildings. I also like how after the fully on land section, the water starts to flow forward, which feels like it's making you go much faster. Unfortunately, just like Peach Beach, this also ends with a pretty open and plain water section. Not only is that boring by itself, but the fact that two tracks had it back to back like that makes this cup even worse. Luckily after this, we get a pretty sharp departure from its beach theme and move on to the ancient section of the cup. This intermission is definitely a huge step up. First off, it's playing the Mount Vobono town theme from Odyssey, so right away, it's peak. Gameplay wise, well, it starts pretty generic, just being on some basic road. The second section gives us a really cool waterfall area. This makes water driving much more fun as you have to battle the current and try and trick off the small stones floating in the water. This one is not a ramp, don't make the mistake. This is definitely one of the more memorable intermissions for me and acts as a great way to transition us to the dinosaurs. Before getting to the track itself, we actually get to drive past a few dinos, which really helps sell the theming of the area. On to track 3, GCN Dino Dino Jungle, and wow, this is a huge improvement over the original. It's now got a Jurassic Park sort of vibe with several research centers and far more dinosaurs. The added dinosaurs here really help. Not only can you use them to actually drive on now, but I love how the T-Rex is added as an additional obstacle. It's such a shame we only get to spend one lap here. This is truly fantastic. But to move on to our final track, we first start again on some pretty basic road, but at least the aesthetic is unique to match the dino vibes, especially with the T-Rex escaping. That was a great touch. The ancient forest vibes transition really well to the ancient ruin vibes of the next track, which culminates in a big water area. This is at least a little better than some of the others we saw in this cup, as there are some question mark blocks to jump for, which is a lot of fun. Following the waterfall upward brings us to our final track, Great Question Mark Block Ruins, which I must say is a fantastic theme. Not only is it a ruins, it's a floating ruins, which fits with the fact that question mark blocks are usually found floating in the Mario series. The gameplay here is also a lot of fun with a ton of twisty turns. There are also several bouncy clouds which fit the sky theme and open the track up for several alternate pathways, which I think is really Mario Kart World's strength as a game. This is another track that I definitely look forward to seeing all the parkour skips in. I've already been seeing a bunch on Twitter and they look amazing. So overall, the Banana Cup was pretty strong. Some of the intermissions were fairly weak and the first two tracks do sort of fall off a bit at the end, but I think as a whole, this is definitely a strong contender. For the Leaf Cup, I was very torn whether to put this or the Banana Cup above each other, but I'll be honest, personal bias definitely won me over here. We start off this cup on Cheep Cheep Falls, and right away, I love the red and white aesthetic here, which fits very well with the Cheep Cheep it's named after. The start of the track is mostly pretty simple, but still absolutely fun to race through. The main highlight comes near the end with its water section. Not only are we faced with a lot of fish, but the river here can be quite tricky to navigate through. It's very twisty, and the edges also flow in a really wonky way that can kind of throw you off. I also appreciate that there's plenty to do in this water, like off-road cuts, rocks and rails to trick off, and Cheep Cheeps to avoid. It makes this track's ending far more interesting than the two water tracks we mentioned in the previous cup, which is especially good here since we go the full 3 laps. Moving to the intermission, and we get another Odyssey song cameo with Bowser's Kingdom theme playing. Love to see it. Or hear it, whatever show. Gameplay wise though, there's not much interesting here. It's just a more road with cars on it. I do like that it's a bit more cliff based, but it's not too much more exciting because of it. Speaking of not too exciting, I can't say I love Dandelion Depths that much. I do like how the colors give off strong Steam Garden vibes on the surface, but the gameplay I didn't feel was too interesting to support that. The depths are also a really cool aesthetic piece themselves, being this glowing cave that's super different from anything else, but the gameplay is just some more water riding. At least there are plenty of areas to trick, so it's much better than say Peach Beach's water segment, but it's not enough to make this track stick with me as much as I wish it would. Sadly, we do still have a bit more blandness to go, with the next intermission starting out with some very open road, which always makes it way too easy to avoid all the cars. But luckily, that's just section 1, as section 2 I think is actually pretty great. As we continue to drive, the sky gets darker and darker as we enter some sort of spooky forest area. They really nail the atmosphere here, as it really feels like some creepypasta is gonna jump out at any moment.
Find my pages!
I love how eventually Peepos even show up as obstacles here. At least I thought they were obstacles. I smashed into one by accident and he kinda just gave me coins. Give me money! I also love how once we reach the water, we go into a spooky boardwalk, and not just any spooky boardwalk, as it's actually one of the Ghost Valley tracks from Super Mario Kart. Using the old SNES tracks for these intermissions is such a great idea, and we'll see this a few more times as we go through the rest of the list. It acts as a perfect build-up to our third track, Boo Cinema. And yes, it's absolute cinema. This might just be my favorite Boo-based track in the series, at the very least it is thematically. The idea of not only going through a haunted movie theater, but also the movie itself is just so cool. Not only do they nail the vibe on the inside, but jumping into the movie puts this old-timey filter over the screen, which is so creative. I love that we are driving on the actual film tape, and the background being filled with spooky haunted manors is fantastic. Being able to glide out of the screen is also just the perfect ending. I absolutely love this track. But we still got one more to go. The intermission starts by taking us through a different and longer portion of the Ghost Valley, which I thought was a lot of fun. Coming off of that, we get back onto the land and even get some moose cameos. That does lead us into a small break from the haunted aesthetic as we get into this big tree area that we glide into. I think this is just a nice additional aesthetic to throw on, and it's a lot of fun gameplay wise as there are a ton of different routes to go down here. But soon enough, we are pushed back into the spooky atmosphere as we drive past a ton of cars. Bomb cars. The spookiness really kicks into gear once we enter this graveyard section, and I love how you can see the dry bones rising up from the ground and running onto the course. That's all to prepare us for track 4, Dry Bones Burnout. Yeah, yep, that's the bias right there. This is the first track named after my favorite character, Dry Bones. We don't claim you. I don't know if it's name bias or what, but I loved this course. It acts as this game's main lava level, which allows it to show off this game's interesting lava mechanics. In older games, if you touched lava, you just immediately die, but here you could drive through it for a second before Lakitu picks you up. That might not seem very interesting, but if you have an item like a mushroom or a star, you can actually cut through the lava as a shortcut. I think that's way more interesting than just being forced to respawn, as it gives this track so many more shortcut opportunities. Even without that though, this track excels with several different pathways. It's a lot of fun trying to parkour between them, especially since this track really encourages the use of the new wall riding and rail grinding parkour gimmicks. And I just have to mention again, I love the aesthetic. The part where you glide into the Dry Bones head is great, and the whole track being filled with a ton of bones just gives this a fantastic vibe. So while this cup does have a bit of a weak point near the middle, I think the rest of this was good enough to pull the Leaf Cup into the top half of the list. 3. The Lightning Cup. We start this one off with Wee Moo Moo Meadows. What the hell are you doing here? This is the penultimate cup of the game, and Moo Moo Meadows is a starter course. I understand that the track ordering in this game is a little wonky as it had to work with the open world, but this does just feel wrong. Luckily for this cup, I just so happen to like Moo Moo Meadows. It's fairly unchanged from its 8 Deluxe version, except for the opening portion being a bit less windy. To be honest, I kind of preferred when it was windy, as it made the cows a bit trickier to avoid, and it opened up for some bigger shortcuts. I do like that there are more cows here, but yeah, that was a bit disappointing. This might honestly be weaker than 8's version of the track. Not by too much though, because I still enjoy racing on it. I mean, who could say no to this guy? It being the one to get 3 laps compared to the other tracks in the cup though is a bit tragic. Also, I thought I could run through this tree with a star. Moving on to our next course, we get a bit more basic road, but I do like that a few moo-moos were thrown on to help make it more distinct. The addition of the power line to rail grind on also helps with the gameplay, and section 2 having some Batui piranha plants is nice as well. Although I will say, since we know that they can use retro tracks for these intermissions, it would have been kinda cool if they used N64 moo-moo farms here. Luckily, our yearning for retro is a bit satiated in the second section as we get to drive through Choco Island from Super Mario Kart. It's not really super special, but hey, I still like the callback. It also makes perfect sense to be here as our next track is N64 Choco Mountain. This is one of the more interesting remakes as they totally changed the theme behind the track. Unlike Dino Dino Jungle where the Jurassic Park evolution felt very natural, this has been turned into a weird mechanical monster truck arena. Despite the strange theme choice, I honestly really liked it. Gameplay wise, it's still really fun to go through, and I love the additional charge and chucks added here to fill in the empty space. The iconic boulder dodging section is still perfectly intact, and overall I think this is a cool remake of the original. I can understand some not loving the theme they went with, but after just having the normal version in the booster course pass, I appreciate the switch up. The intermission following has us drive through some more of Choco Mountain, which gives us some nice hilly terrain to trick on before we get back to the road. I like the robotic brambles they added here, not only because I love brambles, but they're a nice way to get some speed boosts. I also like how the road here has a lot of sloped walls to drive on. It reminds me a lot of Moonview Highway, as some even split up into alternate routes, which makes this road segment more interesting than the standard. Eventually, after crossing over a drawbridge, we end up in our third track, Wee Toad's Factory. Everyone predicted that this one would return as it's a fantastic track, and this remake certainly did not disappoint. It's pretty much exactly the same as the Wii version with a few alternate routes thrown into the ceiling. That just makes it an even stronger course as it really highlights all the wall jumping and rail grinding this game introduced. This is definitely another one I'm very sad we don't get to spend a full 3 laps on. Moving on to the intermission, it starts pretty basic with some water and some road, though I do like that there are some skeeters on the road to act as obstacles. Eventually though, we reach the gate of Bowser's Castle, and this is when I start to like the intermission much more. Once we go through, we are actually placed onto a retro battle course, N64 Big Donut. This works perfectly as it splits the road off into 2 and we have to try and avoid several boom booms. The lava pool in the center just makes so much sense to match up with the Bowser Castle aesthetic. Once both paths recombine, we still have a bit further to go before the actual track, and this area is really cool. We essentially have to climb up a volcano, which gives us a ton of different route options as we have to avoid lava and falling boulders. If we manage to survive all of that, we are finally flown up into this game's rendition of Bowser's Castle. This is a really good contender in the Bowser Castle competition. The interior section gives several alternate route choices with this game's parkour mechanics, and I also love the outside turn afterward going past several lava bubbles. The best part though definitely comes when we shoot ourselves up a lava fall into the sky. It transitions so smoothly into a storm cloud, and the road we land on has a really fun mechanic that forces you to drive extremely fast while on top of it, indicated by the blue sparks coming from your tires. That makes this section very fast paced and intense, and what else could you really ask for in a Bowser's Castle track? This is easily one of my favorite takes on the theme, and I think it's a perfect ender for this cup. So while it was a bit weird having Moo Moo Meadows at the start, the Lightning Cup afterward just kept hitting us with bangers, including many of the intermissions, definitely well deserving of placing high up on the list. 2. The Star Cup. This is what I would class as this game's Snow Cup. Oh, and Wario's there. I've always liked snow settings, so automatically I was kind of already biased towards liking this cup, and it definitely did not disappoint. It starts off with DSDK Pass, which is a course I never really loved from that game. Unlike Desert Hills though, it's not because it's a bad course, it's just not as interesting to me as most of the Nitro courses. In World though, I actually enjoyed the track quite a bit, and I'm alright with its reintroduction, even if there are a few others I would have rather had instead. It's sort of a Shroom Ridge situation for me, where I didn't care for the course originally, but in a new setting, I think it's pretty cool. There are a few new added shortcuts on the way up to the mountain, and I like all the cabins added up near the top as it makes the track feel so much more lively. I do, however, have to criticize the fact that for some reason, they removed all the snowmen at the bottom. That was like the most iconic part of the track, and the snowman is one of the game's new characters, so the model is literally in the game. Well, whatever, the track was still fun even without them being there. Moving to the intermission, I really like the vibe they went for here. Having to drive past log cabins and a bunch of moose is just really cozy. I also love the theme of the second section where we have to drive up a ski resort. It's a bit too wide and easy to avoid the Shy Guys and Ice Bros, but at least the theme is good. That brings us up into the Comet Observatory for our second track, Starview Peak. Now I know, I'm Mario Galaxy's #1 hater. But this track is good. Hey, Rosalina's Ice World still sucks. I think they utilized the theming here way better, as you get to ride across a split green and yellow road. Stealing Ice Ice Outpost's whole vibe here. I love how vertical these slopes can get. It really feels like some Mario Kart 8 anti-gravity stuff at times. I also love the glittering water road that we fly to near the halfway point. It's definitely one of the best looking water sections in the game, and it has plenty to do with rings to speed through and places to trick on. So even if I may dislike Galaxy, I can't deny a good track when I see one. I also can't deny that the intermission after this is pretty great too. It takes place on a very icy cliffside, which is already interesting as it means the road is very slippery. I also love how at one point you get to go into an icy cave. Yeah, really happy you downloaded that game Switch too, I can't wait to play it. After the cave, penguins even start to slide all over the road too, which just help make staying alive here all the more difficult. I also love how this ends with a giant leap off the mountain. It really makes this intermission specifically feel much more special than a lot of the others. That transitions us into our third track, 8 Sky High Sundae. This is technically the only 8 Deluxe track in the game, even though we all know it was made for Tour and just so happened to get an 8 Deluxe first. Now of the Tour original tracks, this was definitely my least favorite, so I was pretty disappointed that this got in over Ninja Hideaway. But with that said, this is another track that was significantly improved in this game. Throughout the entire track, there are now a ton of alternate paths. I also love that the super weird and out of place rail that gave you anti-gravity boosts in 8 Deluxe is now used for rail grinding. Honestly, that alone makes me think this track was originally designed for World and they just decided to put it in Tour and 8 as well, because seriously, what were they thinking there? The new graphics in this game also make the ice cream theme look so much better and not just like a Roblox obby. But that brings us to the final intermission track, and I like that it keeps the ice cream theming for a bit before going back onto the ice. It's not just any ice we go back to though, as it's actually another retro track in the form of SNES Vanilla Lake 1. This is especially nice to see since the Vanilla Lake tracks have never been remade outside of Tour and Super Circuit before. The additions of Freezies and snow skating Goombas are also a great touch. Moving off that track for section 2, we are put into a cold and dark river section. I love the atmosphere here and the fact that it has nostalgic Ice Bros. It also very smoothly transitions us to the next area, which has us riding in Stormwater. This is a lot more interesting than normal as the water is filled with a ton of waves, which opens up far more tricking opportunities. That Stormwater is obviously a big part of the final track, 7's Wario Shipyard. This is a very interesting remake as the original used underwater driving a ton. In Mario Kart World though, that feature has been removed, instead having us drive on top of the water. I'm honestly not sure which version of this track I prefer, but at the very least, the fact that this is Stormwater here makes tricking all over the place a lot of fun. I also like the more ghostly atmosphere given to this track in World, though I could understand some people preferring the original. Either way, I think this works as a great conclusion to the the cup. I had a lot of fun here. So for doing a fantastic job with its snow theming, I think the Star Cup is easily one of my favorites in the entire game. Honestly, might even change to be my favorite later, as it was an extremely close contest. But as of right now, I think I'm going to have to give the crown to the Special Cup. Yes, if you didn't know, the Special Cup does indeed exist. You just have to unlock it first by beating all the others. I think the concept for this cup is really cool by itself, as if you look at the world map, it's just a straight shot leading up to Rainbow Road. Before we get there though, we start off with Acorn Heights. Mario Kart is no stranger to these tree tracks, with others like Maple Treeway and Wild Woods. While probably not my favorite of the bunch, I still think this one is pretty strong. I like the rail tricks you can do at the start, and the area with the leaves and mushrooms following the glider is a lot of fun too. There is so much space to parkour around here, so this is another one I really look forward to seeing the optimal route for. The part leading back up the tree with the falling acorns is also a really nice addition, as you have so many options of paths to choose from, but you can never really tell which one the big acorn will roll down. It's kind of like gambling, and I love gambling. But that's pretty much the end of this track, and I think it's a great one to get the full 3-lap treatment. Moving to the intermission now, we still stick with the forest setting for a bit, which I like, even if the road itself is a bit plain. A few wigglers also get thrown in after this, and while they are easy to avoid, it's nice to have some more unique obstacles. Speaking of easy to avoid, there are also some Sting Bee, but again, I think if you put even a little bit of effort, you'll be able to easily avoid them. But that brings us into track 2, SNES Mario Circuit. What the hell are you doing here? Yeah, having a Mario Circuit in the Special Cup is kinda crazy. Granted, there are some difficult turns here, but it still feels really out of place. Gameplay-wise though, I actually thought this was a pretty well done remake, for the most part. This takes a very interesting concept of combining the first 3 SNES Mario Circuits into one big track. I think that works really well, as the original SNES tracks are obviously a lot less interesting than a modern track. Now as for criticism, I want to kill Mario Circuit 3. This track has no reason to return in over half of the Mario Kart series, when Mario Circuit 4 has not shown up since Super Circuit. Mario Circuit 3 was just in 8 Deluxe's Booster Course Pass, so I think this track makes that choice even more baffling. Mario Circuit 4 either should have been there or replaced 3 here. But driving through these tracks is still fun, and I appreciate that this cup lets each track act as its own segment, so we actually get the full experience. The only other thing I'd criticize is the fact that the glider ramp from Mario Circuit 2, which was added in Mario Kart 7, isn't here anymore, and I think that's a shame. For an SNES remake though, this track is definitely one of the best. Moving out toward the intermission, we honestly have a pretty plain one, as it starts out on some open dirt with barely any obstacles. At the very least, section 2 is a bit cooler, as it has us use a glider ramp to fly over the road and eventually into Moo Moo Meadows. Now this isn't one of the 4 main tracks, but since it was on the way, we do get a few Moo Moo cameos. Another missed opportunity to add N64 Moo Moo Farms, but hey, this is still a good section, especially since we get to see portions of the track that we don't race on normally. Unfortunately, the intermission section after this is extremely weak, being a super open road with tons of space to avoid any cars. I'm really not doing a good job selling this as the best cup, huh? Well, things do at least improve as we get a lot closer to our 3rd track. I really like the chain chomp bouncing around the flower bed here, as it reminds me a lot of DS Peach Gardens, which is likely intentional since our 3rd track is Peach Stadium. Now yes, this is one of the repeat tracks, but remember, the Shell Cup version was... So since we barely got to explore it there, this version feels way better. The road here is both very windy and vertical, again feeling like Mario Kart 8 Anti-Gravity. The other tracks in this game are really not styled like this, so it helps it stand out. And again, the original version in the Shell Cup was completely flat, so I don't hold anything against the Special Cup for the reuse, only the Shell Cup. But that brings us to our final intermission of the video, and it's actually the shortest one, as it's a perfectly straight line. This fits with the theme this cup has been going for, as it's all just build up for the big event. While the gameplay in this intermission isn't horribly special, I think it works well for that anticipation build-up. Once we finally reach this floating star, it's time to enter Rainbow Road. Up until this point, this cup has just been a pretty solid one, but what makes it the best is this track right here. This is easily one of the top 10 Mario Kart tracks of all time, and in my opinion, probably the game's best showing. I was genuinely taken aback by just how phenomenal this thing truly was. And the best part? It's a segment track, so just like DK Spaceport in the Mushroom Cup, we get the entire experience in this Special Cup. First off, even if layout-wise it's not your favorite, this is easily the best looking Rainbow Road, which is such a relief after the original one for 8 was probably the weakest looking in the series. I really want to save some of my discussion for the track itself for when I do my track ranking, but I do want to mention that there are just so many highlights here. The anti-gravity-like road appears once again, and it feels super fitting. I also love the fact that the super speed road we saw in Bowser's Castle makes several appearances here, which fits the fast-paced and intense nature of the Rainbow Road series of tracks just as well. We also get some split roads to jump between, which is a Rainbow Road staple that I always like to see. Oh yeah, and all of that was just in the first section of the track. This is a genuine journey, as it takes you to so many unique locations on the way, which I think fits this game in particular so well. The second section section featuring the glittering water from Starview Peak is so magical, and I love that the Rainbow Road also has a blue color throughout this entire section. It's so unique from any other Rainbow Road in the franchise, and this track just keeps going. The section following brings us into a space station, but executed so much better than 8's version. I love that the primary color here is red to contrast the blue we just came from, and I especially love the section inside the tube. This just straight up is anti-gravity, and the fact that we have to both dodge rainbow thwomps and have the special fast-moving road makes this a blast. And then of course returning to the Rainbow Road itself for the final section was just so magical. I think this track is easily one of the Mario Kart series best, and it hard carries this cup up to number 1. Even if there were a few weak intermissions, the fact that most of the cup is just this journey on Rainbow Road 100% makes up for that and then some. I can understand some people not fully agreeing that this cup should be number 1 due to its few low points, but I can't deny the magic of this Rainbow Road. So because of this track and the others still being pretty solid, I think the Special Cup is my current favorite in Mario Kart World. But anyways, that's it for this video. Do you absolutely love the intermission between Shy Guy Bazaar and Wario Stadium and hate me for ranking the Flower Cup low? Let me know in the comments. This is my first of many Mario Kart World videos, and wow, was it way longer than I was expecting it to be. I really hope you all enjoyed it because I spent a ton of time editing this together, to the point where I haven't really got to play the game much. But now I actually get to go play the game before getting back to work. But before I go, I gotta thank my members being Levi Strux, Alki42, Maidzo2, Nuclear, Cassie Channel, Fredbear's Diner, Nathaniel B, Seth the Sunsun Villano, Luma, Blessed Tiger, Yanni the Duck, Wyatt Derpy, Trainer Mo, Mevins 2001, Kid Trunks 15, Caddy Shroom, Enchanted Skull, SMA, B Major 2003, Arson the Raboot, Sir Musty, Belandor, Puggles Are Fun, Diluted Colors, Cinder CC, Jade Avery, Pronto Clone, Thicky Reiki, Ungenio TM, CW McCain, Tibby, JubeTube Tesseract, Mr. McMahon 5702, Hippopotamus, Jameson Pageson, Wilbur, Golden Save 15, Z Frost, Stuffy Ant, Just Dex, Concanut Keep, and Christian Flattery Sequel Edition. But anyways, dry bones for Smash, and I'll see you guys next time.